Hello, everyone, and welcome to AP US History for Winners with your teacher, Mr. Johnson. Last time we talked about the Mexican American War and the Compromise of 1850, and today we are talking about sectional conflict. So, if you are ready, let's begin. All right, so the first topic that we need to understand in sectional conflicts is actually immigration. All right, so at this time in American history and around the mid 1800s, there are a lot of immigrants coming from all over the world. And to the West Coast, a lot of the immigrants are coming from China. Okay, so a lot of immigrants from Asia are moving to the West Coast, but China in particular in the 1850s. And a lot of these Chinese people are going to work in areas like gold mines, factories, railroads, especially on railroads and on farming. And so they're going to make a lot of the labor force in the West Coast, like in California at this time. Now, this isn't in this unit, but a little call ahead. Eventually, America is going to get so upset with immigration, especially with Chinese immigration, that they're going to sign a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is going to forbid Chinese immigrants from coming to the country. That's another unit, but I just kind of wanted to show you what's coming, I guess, a little bit with Chinese immigration. As far as European immigration, okay, the Irish are coming a lot to the northeast, and a lot of these Irish people are Catholic, and they are settling in places like Boston, New York, Rhode Island, okay? And a lot of immigrant children, especially ones that are Catholic, are going to attend what's called parochial schools, which are essentially private Catholic schools. And another group of people who are coming to America a lot this time are the Germans, who are often moving into frontier areas in the Midwest, like like Ohio, for example, and they're often moving here as farmers. And so we see all these different groups of people coming to America, the Chinese, the Irish, the Germans, coming to different parts of America for some different reasons, but what's the impact of their arrival here? And what's going to happen is something called nativism. So nativism is the fear, distrust, and dislike of foreigners. And often at this time, it's very anti-Catholic. If you remember, America, the religious groups that found America are Protestant, right? And if we go all the way back to the colonies, there were only a few colonies where Catholics were even accepted, like in Maryland, the Maryland's Act of Toleration. Okay, so a lot of America was Protestant, which is still Christian, but it's not Catholic. And a lot of America is anti-Catholic because they thought that Catholic people had the Pope who they were listening to instead of the president, for example. Okay, so nativist groups want to limit the political power of immigrants. And in fact, there's even a political party formed about the distrust of immigrants, and that party is called the Know Nothing Party. And it is a party formed due to nativism. And another belief that they have is they want to ban Catholics from holding office, and they want tough immigration and naturalization laws. And that means they want to make it harder for people to come to America, and the people that do come to America, they want to make it harder for them to become citizens. And they're going to be a political party that's going to see some success in the 1852 and 1856 election, even though they never hold presidential office. Okay, so we're going to talk about one election in this, and that's the election of 1852. And in this election, we see a Democrat versus a Whig. So the Democrat is the guy pictured on the left. That is Franklin Pierce. And on the top right is the Whig. His name is Winfield Scott. Now, one thing to know is that the Whigs, and we talked about this last time, the Whigs are divided over slavery. They cannot decide what they want to do about the issue of slavery. Now, they try to appeal to Catholics and to immigrants, but it does not work. They're not very successful. They get beaten very badly in this election. If you can see in the map in the bottom right, there's only 4 states that the Whigs end up carrying, okay? So they get beaten very badly. And this is the last election that the Whigs compete in. So this marks the end of the Whigs as a political party. For the Democrats, they believe in limited government, and they're a little bit more unified along this belief because they basically just want states to be able to make their own decisions for themselves. Now, it does take the Democrats a long time to decide on Franklin Pierce. He's not known as a particularly strong president, and when he does become president, he alienates a lot of people in the Democratic Party that may have been anti-slavery, like Democrats from the North, because he enforces a couple of things. One of them is called the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which we're going to talk a lot about next time, but just put that on your brain for now. And another thing he enforces is the Fugitive Slave Act, which we talked about. That came from the Compromise of 1850. So the Democrats, Pierce, are successful in this election, but they're alienating a lot of people in the North. Okay, so all this obviously is leading and building up to this North and South conflict, this sectionalism, where people see themselves more as a part of the North, a part of the South, than they do a part of America. We've gone over this a few times, but let's just review again. So the South is very dependent on slavery for their economy. And remember that they start to view slavery as a positive good. And they're believing in the issue of states' rights, that the states should have the power to decide their own laws, not the federal government. And this is in contrast with the North, who is a very manufacturing focused economy, and they have free labor. So they don't, many states in the North do not have any slaves. Most of them do not have any slaves. They are complicit with slavery, meaning that they're not objecting to slavery on principle, but they think it's going to undermine the free labor market, and they don't believe it will work for the North. But remember, because they're buying these goods from the South, they are complicit. They are allowing slavery to prosper. And this is going to give rise to the free soil movement. Now, we've talked about this in the last lesson. The free soil movement is the political party and the movement that wants to limit the expansion of slavery instead of trying to abolish it. So it's kind of like a little half measure, a little half step along the way to abolishing slavery. So no new states would have slavery. We'll talk more about that in our next lesson. So there are some people, though, that are abolitionists. And an abolitionist is someone who is against slavery. Now, this is a minority of the Northerners. So it's not most people in the North. But the people who were abolitionists were very true to their beliefs, and they made their campaigns very visible, right? So the abolitionists would make it known what they believed in. And the kind of arguments they would use would be like moral arguments, right? That it goes against the morals of the United States to enslave one group of people. If you think about the Declaration of Independence, right? All men are created equal, right? That kind of goes against that idea right there. The abolitionists are going to help slaves escape, even though there's this really strict Fugitive Slave Act going on. They have the Underground Railroad. There's pictured Harriet Tubman, famous slave who escaped and then went back and helped other slaves escape on the Underground Railroad, which was basically a series of houses that slaves would know were safe, that they could hide in on their way to escape either north to northern states, maybe to Canada, or even south to Mexico. And another way that abolitionists are going to campaign is through violence. And in particular, one individual named John Brown. And we're going to talk more about him next time too, but I just want to put his name in your head. So that is it for our notes on sectional conflict. This is a topic we've talked about before, but the new thing coming out of this really is this idea of immigration and how that makes an impact and kind of just the more unraveling of the political parties. So thank you so much for watching. Let's make sure we get our big ideas down. So number one, describe the different immigrant groups that came to America in the mid-1800s. Number two, what is nativism and who do they hate? And number three, describe the tactics of the abolition movement. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.